Go ahead. I'm just saying. I'm just writing stuff.
That's okay. I'm just the tape recorder is going to be there, so you can speak up a little.
Okay.
So I'd like to ask, but I don't think I need to. I'd like to ask people what their role was in the strategic planning process. I'm not going to ask you that question. What I'm going to ask you is...
Okay? Yeah.
Thank
Do you mind bringing me a glass of water? Thank you.
What I'm going to ask you is, what drove you to initiate the OET strategic planning process?
So what drove me was a vision I always had, that the problem with government is that we don't do anything intentionally, that we're always crisis managing, we're always reacting to whatever crisis is happening. And so for staff, and because I had been with this particular staff for almost 15 years, I just felt like when I made the decision to become the deputy director, I knew I had a vision in my mind for what I think I wanted to do in that space. And so I knew in order to do that, I really needed to engage the staff in a way that they had never been engaged, and in a way that made them feel some sense of control of their world. Because in government, you never feel that. There's never any onboarding. People hand you files and say, I don't know what these are. You can throw them away or keep them. And you're like, well, these have social security numbers on them, shouldn't I? And people are like, yeah, well, now the responsibility is yours. So if you throw them away and something happens, that's on you. And there's always this sense that, thank you, that you create risk and then make people risk adverse, because you give them nothing to help them feel like taking a risk is to the benefit of them or to the work that they're doing.
So you're a wide range of situations and conditions. What made you think that strategic planning would be able to address those issues?
So, part of it is my own background. I have a planning background, and I've done strategic planning with nonprofits. I have done that as something that I do for a living, off on top of the work that I do, in my everyday life. So I also know that process works when it's done well, when it's done thoughtfully, and when it really, when you put the resources behind it. And I also knew I could do those things. I could put the resources behind it. I could establish a leadership role around it. I could engage my management team behind it. So all the elements to making it work, I feel were there.
So tell me a little bit more about engaging the management team from the beginning of your conceptualization.
Yeah. So I think I'm fortunate because all the managers that worked for me, I worked with as a peer. So I got to know them. I got to know their style. I got to know what drives them. And I think because of that, I felt really confident that they would see me as somebody, as a transformational leader. And I think because of that, they put a lot of faith in me, because I think they know I put a lot of faith back in them. And so there's this reciprocal relationship that we have because we've been peers, and we've survived a number of leadership changes and a lot of leadership styles. Some that were, somewhat destructive and unhealthy. But I think in the end, everybody felt like this is something we're doing together, but we have our faith in Julio that he trusts us to help him lead it, but we also trust him to lead it with us.
So how did that play out kind of tactically?
Yes. So I think, like any process, there's some people who step right up to it and have their own, I think one of the challenges is when you have strong leaders is the style differentiation. So I have some staff who are just demonstratively more assertive, and others who are more laid back and use their leadership in a much more facilitatory kind of process. Um, so I think that was one of my biggest challenges, was helping them to see the value in each other's style and seeing that no one was greater than the other. And so when we first started talking together, when people would come to me, the more assertive ones with ideas, I would say, that's great, but let's share with everybody. And I know that was hard for them, because they were like, well, if you agree and I agree, isn't that enough? And then getting them to see, well, it's not about just you and I agreeing. It's about a collective consciousness. And then for those who were